In recent weeks, Washington has been shaken by the unexpected consequences of a bold economic gamble. President Donald Trump's 50% tariff policy, designed to protect American industry and strike at foreign competition, has spiraled into an $87 billion economic shockwave. What began as a political statement of strength is now being described by economists as one of the most destabilizing trade moves in modern U.S. history. Reports from the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg reveal that the new tariff regime, implemented with the goal of bringing jobs back to America, has instead triggered massive retaliation from global trading partners. China, the European Union, and Canada have all imposed mirror tariffs, targeting America's most sensitive export sectors: medicine, agricultural goods, and high-end technology components. Within weeks, supply chains that took decades to build began to buckle. According to data from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the policy has already erased over $87 billion in trade value, pushing small and medium enterprises to the brink. Pharmaceutical companies warn of severe shortages in key ingredients imported from Asia, while American farmers are reporting crop surpluses they can no longer sell abroad. In Silicon Valley, leading tech firms have suspended several projects after tariffs on semiconductor components from Taiwan and South Korea doubled their costs overnight. A senior official at the Department of Commerce, speaking anonymously to Reuters, described the situation bluntly. The intention was to revive American manufacturing. Instead, we've started a chain reaction that's hitting every corner of the economy. The reaction on Wall Street was immediate. Stock prices of major exporters, from Intel to Pfizer to John Deere, plummeted within days of the announcement. Economists compare the speed of the downturn to the 2008 financial crisis, noting that this time the damage is self-inflicted. Farmers in Iowa and Kansas are watching prices for soybeans and corn collapse as China halts imports in retaliation. The irony, experts say, is cruel. The very communities Trump vowed to protect are now bearing the heaviest losses. The backlash has not been confined to boardrooms and farmlands. In hospitals across the country, procurement officers report that the cost of essential medications, including antibiotics and cancer treatments, has doubled in just a month. The American Medical Association issued a rare political statement, warning that supply disruptions may soon affect patient care. At the heart of the crisis lies a political miscalculation. Trump's advisors believed that America's dominance in global markets would force others to compromise. Instead, the world adapted. New trade corridors emerged almost overnight between Asia and Europe, bypassing the United States entirely. According to Financial Times analysts, this realignment could permanently reduce America's role in global trade by up to 15% over the next 5 years. Inside Washington, panic is spreading. Internal memos from the Treasury Department warn of sustained inflationary pressure and sectoral instability if tariffs remain in place. What was meant to be a show of economic strength has turned into a test of survival for farmers, for industries, and perhaps even for the political legacy of Donald Trump himself. As the tariff shock deepened, its ripple effects began tearing through every layer of the American economy. What once appeared to be a temporary disruption quickly evolved into a full-blown crisis, one that even Trump's closest allies now privately describe as an economic self-sabotage. Within weeks, the agriculture belt turned into the first casualty. Reports from CNN Business confirm that soybean exports to China have fallen by nearly 80%. Grain silos in Iowa, Missouri, and Nebraska are overflowing with unsold crops. Prices on the Chicago Board of Trade have hit record lows. For farmers, it feels like déjà vu, a modern echo of the 1980s farm crisis. But this time triggered not by weather or debt, but by policy. In interviews, desperate farmers admit that subsidies and aid packages announced by Washington are too little, too late. Meanwhile, the tech sector, once America's proudest symbol of innovation, faces a similar collapse. Semiconductor and battery manufacturers report skyrocketing costs as critical imports from South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan are now locked behind the 50% tariff wall. According to The Verge, several U.S. firms have begun outsourcing production entirely to Singapore and Vietnam to avoid the tariff trap. Ironically, The America First trade war is accelerating the migration of American technology overseas. Pharmaceutical supply chains have not been spared either. The New York Times reports that over 60% of raw ingredients used in U.S. drug manufacturing come from foreign suppliers, mainly in India and China. The tariffs have doubled the cost of essential materials, forcing domestic producers to cut output. Pharmacies in Texas, Ohio, and Michigan are already facing shortages of basic antibiotics. One medical distributor described the crisis as a silent pandemic, spreading quietly through every hospital shelf. Economists warn that the cumulative damage may exceed $87 billion within months. The Brookings Institution calls it a tariff shock equivalent to a natural disaster, eroding consumer confidence and freezing investment. Across corporate America, layoffs have begun. Boeing has paused contracts with several suppliers. Ford has cut shifts in Michigan. Even Walmart, the retail giant once seen as tariff-proof, announced that it will raise prices on over 10,000 imported items. Political tremors are being felt in Washington. Public opinion polls show growing disillusionment among rural voters, the same base that powered Trump's political rise. Governors from key agricultural states, including Iowa and Kansas, have issued urgent appeals for federal intervention. Behind closed doors, Republican lawmakers are pressuring Trump's economic advisors to reconsider the tariff plan before the damage becomes irreversible. Internationally, America's rivals are seizing the opportunity. China has announced a new partnership with the European Union to stabilize trade routes bypassing the U.S., while India has quietly signed fresh agricultural and pharmaceutical export agreements with African nations once dominated by American suppliers. Experts now warn that the United States is entering a dangerous cycle, where tariffs drive up domestic costs, weaken exports, and erode political trust. The very strategy meant to restore American power is, piece by piece, dismantling it from within. By early autumn, the tariff crisis had transformed from an American problem into a global turning point. The $87 billion blow to U.S. trade sent shockwaves through markets from London to Tokyo. Analysts at the IMF now describe it as a trade war implosion, a self-inflicted wound that reshaped the balance of global power. Across Europe and Asia, nations once dependent on American imports have begun to form new economic blocs. The European Union and China announced a joint Stability Trade Pact aimed at reducing reliance on U.S. goods and creating a tariff-free corridor across Eurasia. Within weeks, European pharmaceutical firms started sourcing raw materials directly from Beijing, bypassing the United States altogether. In essence, Trump's tariff wall isolated the world's largest economy from the very supply chains it helped create. Inside Washington, panic has given way to political warfare. Trump's advisors are split, some pushing for a rollback of tariffs to prevent deeper recession, others insisting that standing firm is the only way to project strength before the upcoming election. Congressional hearings have turned chaotic, with lawmakers demanding answers about collapsing farm incomes, job losses in the tech sector, and rising medical costs. The Financial Times reports that even Wall Street donors, once loyal to Trump's economic vision, are now redirecting funding to centrist candidates promising a trade reset. Meanwhile, protests have erupted in several farming states, with banners reading, "We fed America. Now we're forgotten." Experts warn that the real damage may not be measured in dollars but in credibility. America's reputation as the engine of global trade has been shaken. Allies are questioning Washington's reliability, while rivals are capitalizing on its missteps. Beijing, in particular, has moved swiftly, expanding its Belt and Road trade networks and offering tariff-free access to nations once tightly bound to U.S. markets. As the crisis deepens, the political narrative shifts. What began as an attempt to make America great again is now being portrayed as a symbol of isolation and miscalculation. Economists argue that even if tariffs are lifted, the trust once lost in global partnerships will take years to rebuild. For now, the message from the world is clear. Power in the 21st century belongs not to those who build walls around trade, but to those who build bridges across it.